Record. That looks like it's doing it. Okay. All right, so let's hide that. So we have our image here. First thing I'm going to go is to Window, Libraries. So this will take a second. You'll see I've got some trees that I've already started to put into a tree entourage folder. You can always create new libraries. So I don't know why this guy is doing in here. Let's just get rid of him. So what's cool is that I can, if I have this file just opened up by itself, I can go down to this icon here and say, add graphic. And now I've got the tree in my library to use for however long I decide. So I'm just gonna, again, just create a new document just so I have that open. I'll double click on this so that I'm actually editing this within the library and not separately. I'll just create this new layer so you can see how it works. So let's give it like a very bold color so we can see what it looks like. So like I said, this one has a white background that we want to get rid of. You could use the magic wand tool and then like you see, oops, wrong layer. And then a lot of times it won't select within that because of your settings. However, if you deselect contiguous up here, you'll see that it actually starts to select all that white in between. So that's one way, and then you can just delete it. I just hear a lot of, that's one way to do it. This is something I was talking about in my 267 class today. There's a lot of ways to skin a cat. I don't know why you'd skin a cat. It sounds awful, but that's the saying, and it is what it is. So that's one way to get rid of the white. Another way that's a little more complex, you can go to Select, Color Range, and it'll give you this eyedropper tool, and you can just say, get rid of all the white. And then I can change the fuzziness to bring in or remove more. So maybe I want to get some of that. Just hit delete. So you can see that even some of that white in the leaves was removed, which sometimes it looks cool, sometimes not. The last way that's good to do it is to use the blending modes. So if I go to Effects, Blending Options, let's make this a little smaller if I can. Maybe not. So you'll see that there's this slider of black and whites. Because this has a white background, I want to remove the white. So if I start to drag this over, it'll start to remove those whites, and depending on how far, it'll remove it more. So this is a good slider to use to remove some of that white or clean it up. What I like about this too is that you can, if you have that black background tree, you can do the same thing. If you're having trouble getting rid of some of the background, if you hold Alt on a Windows, you can actually split that to have a kind of a gradient of colors removed to get a little more detail out of that or removal. Hit OK. And what's nice is that it's kind of parametric in a sense that it's non-destructive. You can see in here that there's still that white, but it has been removed, which is nice. So that's a good way to clean it up. I will then rasterize this or convert it to a smart object. I can delete this since I'm pretty happy with the removal. Then I'll rasterize it. So is that as far as you should take this? No, good answer. So we probably want to enhance this a little. We can even begin to kind of cheat the vegetation itself. A lot of vegetation in the desert has more of that yellow greenish instead of the blue green to it. This one isn't too bad, but it could look a little better. If I go to my layer adjustments, you'll see that I use these more so than going up to image adjustments. If I do a layer adjustment down here, choose Hue and Saturation, and start to mess with those colors. If I start to drag this, I can convert it to being some kind of Eastern looking tree, or I can give it that fall color to it, or I can find something that's a little more of that yellow. So maybe a little bit there. I can brighten it a little more. Let's see what happens in these others. Can make it look like it belongs in a book by Dr. Seuss. So you can do that. You can also, instead of changing everything, you can change just a color. You have control over the yellows and greens, which is nice. So maybe I'll focus on the greens, change. Oh, there's actually not a whole lot of greens in here. As you can see, I'm not changing a whole lot. So let's look at the yellows. There we go. So that has a little bit more yellow to it now without having to change much of that bark. So that's starting to enhance it a little bit in the colors. Is there more to do?
Yes.
Yeah, there's always going to be a yes when I ask that question. So maybe you want to enhance the highlights and shadows of this. I'm going to go back to the original image. This is a good time to kind of either convert it to a smart object or make a duplicate so that you don't destroy the original image if you end up screwing up. So I'm just going to right click, say convert to smart object. That way all these filters are kind of parametric where they can always be edited later. So I'm going to image, adjustments, shadows, highlights. You can see already that it makes a huge difference by turning that on or off. It's a little too bright. I still want some of those shadows in there. But you can see that it starts, instead of it reading black in those shadows, that it brings a little more light to it. I can do the same thing with the highlights to adjust those as well. The highlights are already pretty good in here. I'm gonna hit OK now. So that you can see if I just turn that on or off, that it adds a little bit more light to the image. Let's look at another thing. There's a lot of ways in which we can enhance this. One of my favorite things is using the curves. I always like to create a little S curve. I always drag that over there. So by that, I take my shadows and make those a little richer. And then the same thing with the highlights. I'll make those slightly brighter. You could mess with it yourself, or you can pick one of these drop downs so you can increase contrast, linear contrast, medium contrast. That's really what this is doing, is creating that contrast in the image. I'm going to drop this below my hue and saturation level because you'll find that as you make these edits that it's going to make a huge difference and really enhance these colors. I kind of like it to look a little more desaturated so that it's not too overwhelming. So that looks a little better. So let's do a couple more things to this. So you can, this is always kind of nice too. I can, let's duplicate this one real quick and I'll turn off the effects to this one. And I can group these real quick and just turn it on or off. And you can already see the difference that this does in enhancing the tree. Does that all come out clearly? Okay. So there's a couple more things I'll do to this. Let's add some shadows and highlights to this tree as well. I'm going to go back to that original image, go to my effects, and do inner shadow. Is it going to let me change this? Nope, this is going to be a pain. All right, well, I'll try and navigate. Is it really not going to let me? Nothing. Jeez. Thanks a lot, Adobe. So that looks like the size I'm sticking with. Okay, so the thing I want to do is I want to give this kind of like a 50% gray right around here. I want to make it a linear burn because we're going to use the linear burn to add shadow to this. I have to figure out what direction I want that shadow to come from. So in this case, I can already see that the highlights are over here. So I'll change the shadows to be more over there. I'll make that 100%. Maybe it's even more so from the bottom. And we can see that if I change the distance, it brings that shadow more up the tree. The choke changes how much it kind of wraps around the tree. And then the size makes it whether it's a really hard, sharp shadow or more of a softer shadow. So maybe I want to change the opacity a little so it's not too much. Maybe it's a little bit bigger. And then so that's better. You could do like this gray to kind of make it more shadow, or you can find a color similar to this tree itself, so more of a green, so that it's not like just a hard black. Then if I remove that noise, that helps it a little too. Bless. So if I hit OK, and you'll see like if I turn this on or off, it again kind of creates this harder shadow over there. You all see that? It's kind of subtle, but you can always make it more intense if you want. So yeah, that should be okay. So just like we added a shadow, we also want to add a highlight to this. So kind of bringing out those lights some more. I'll add another shadow to this. So you'll see that next to the inner shadow, I have a plus sign to add another inner shadow. I'll bring this back to my grays. Instead of doing a linear burn, I will do a linear dodge or add. And you'll see that we'll deselect that, make it so that this is more or less representing those highlights. Bring that a little bit further in. That starts to look pretty good. And I can always increase. You can see how that really makes it kind of highlighted. That's a little drastic. This one's a little better. So it starts to almost kind of look like it's being washed out or really kind of intensified. If you change the noise down here, it kind of makes it a little less consistent and kind of fragmented, like in this preview here. So that looks kind of solid. This looks more fractured. Hit OK. And again, you can see what those effects do to the tree. So here's without all those effects, which looks like it did a good job of highlighting the lights and the darks. But then when I turn this effects on, it really kind of reinforces that. So does that come off clear? Good. And then one last thing I will do to this is just kind of give some more gestural brushing of this tree. So I'll create a new layer. I'll select just the pixels in the tree itself by holding control, you'll see that the icon changes from just this hand to a hand with a dashed box. That means you're only selecting the pixels on that layer, which is just the tree. I'll use the marquee tool, right click over this, give it a fill, 50% gray, hit OK, and change this blending mode to overlay. It's just going to essentially disappear for now. And I'm going to use this to kind of create some additional highlights and shadows by burning and dodging it. So this hand here is going to burn it or add shadow to it. So let's make sure that's set to midtones. You can keep that exposure pretty low at like 30%, maybe even 20 if you want. And then I'm just going to kind of brush over where I see those shadows. So you can see that it slowly gets a little bit darker, especially in these crevices. Maybe a little right there. This is what kind of gives it a little more of an artistic look to it. And it'll really start to give a sense of depth once I turn it on and off a couple times, which is kind of cool. It's always remarkable what kind of difference this makes in it. I'm going to do the same thing with this icon. So if I click and hold, there's the burn option, there's the dodge option. Burn adds shadow, dodge adds highlights. I'll also do this very faint, so maybe a 10. Now I'll just kind of slightly brush over this, maybe give those tips more of a highlight. If I use the brackets next to the letter P on my icon, I can change the size pretty quickly. So you can see that. So I want to just kind of just brush over these a little. Maybe even a little bit of this. So again, give it a sense of depth. Maybe I'll go back to the burn tool to get some of those shadows. Maybe make it a little bit stronger. Okay. And let's just highlight this real quick. I get very finicky with this because it can create some pretty cool effects if you do it and spend enough time on it. Okay, you guys ready for this? Watch what happens when I turn this on or off. Remember what this looks like. Let me just do a little bit right here real quick. Sorry, this is how picky I get sometimes. So watch this. So this looks like it's almost kind of three-dimensional, especially when you turn that off. It looks kind of flat. Now it gives it a lot more dynamic to it. See, look at that, like, especially like right in this area, it almost looks like it's coming out at you. It's like, oh, this looks flat. Like, watch how this is kind of like a mid-tone. Now it's a little more dramatic. Bam, 3D tree. So there you go, there's your tree. I can now go ahead and just save this. And guess what? So there's my tree. Oops, I got rid of it. I can now go back to my window libraries. And there's my tree. And it's just like what I just created in that last Photoshop file. And what's cool is that I can, and I can just go ahead and resize it, do anything I want with it. In this composition, I can just make a copy of it, maybe make it a little smaller, put it on the behind it. Maybe change the opacity to it. So it appears like it's a little bit faded back. I'll go more into this composition, but here's something that's really cool. You can see that there's this cloud icon because it's referring to the tree you just edited or brought in from your library. If I go back to Window and Libraries, so here's that tree. I'll double click that to open it separately. What if now I want to quickly do a autumn or fall type rendering? So I want to change the color of those leaves. I can go to Hue and Saturation real quick, change maybe that color to more of that autumn. It kind of ruins it here, but I can use the brush to just quickly delete that. Maybe not that much. It kind of looks weird. But anyways, I can just go ahead and save it. Now in this file, they've changed to my autumn trees. Yay! I'll go ahead and just delete this because now it's come back to springtime. Save it. Now they're back to spring trees. So that's a cool way that you can start to utilize the cloud trees. So the one last thing to include with this is how you can do really quick, cheap Palo Verde trees. So maybe you want to have some filler space. I'm going to go ahead and finish up this video. Let's